There are moments in life when the air itself seems to grow heavy with meaning, not the kind that uplifts, but the kind that crushes. A silence falls, not the calm of peace, but the stillness that follows the realization that everything we have believed in was a beautiful lie. That moment when the veil slips, when the laughter of the world grows faint and the heart feels the pulse of futility, is the moment one truly awakens. You see, to be born is to be summoned to suffering. Every cry of the newborn is a confession, the first truth spoken by the flesh. Existence hurts. We dress that pain in words like ambition, purpose, hope, but these are only disguises. They are the anesthetics of a species unable to sit in silence with its own despair. Life does not begin with meaning. It begins with will, a blind, restless hunger that neither knows why it moves nor where it is going. The animal hunts, the plant reaches, the man desires. Every act of life is an attempt to fill a void that cannot be filled. Every smile conceals a wound that time cannot close. We imagine we are free, but freedom itself is a mirage. The will moves us long before the intellect invents a reason. We do not decide to desire, we discover that we already do. And by then, it is too late. The trap has closed. To live is to be enslaved by wanting. Look closely. Every joy you've ever tasted carried the seed of its own decay. Every triumph, no matter how bright, was shadowed by the fear of its loss. Every pleasure was paid for in suffering before, during, or after. Happiness is not a state, it is an interval, a brief pause between two demands of the will. And so we run. We chase wealth, love, recognition, not because they bring peace, but because they postpone despair. We live as fugitives from ourselves, pursued by the gnawing suspicion that nothing we do will matter. This suspicion is the beginning of philosophy. It is the crack in the mirror where light enters, only to reveal that what we called meaning was merely reflection, not reality. In every age, humanity has sought to hide from this insight. We built cities of distraction, temples of hope, empires of noise. We surrounded ourselves with tasks and titles, mistaking motion for direction. But beneath all our progress, the same ancient rhythm beats: to hunger, to chase, to tire, to despair. The modern man prides himself on his intelligence, yet he is more enslaved than ever. His chains are no longer iron, but invisible woven of thought, expectation, and desire. He scrolls through illusions, consumes shadows, worships comfort, and calls it freedom. But even in the gleam of his machines, the same old wound throbs beneath, the wound of being forced to exist. We speak of the pursuit of happiness. What a delicate irony. We chase what cannot be held. We crave what disappears at touch. We treat life as a market where satisfaction is for sale, but the currency we spend is time, and time is the only thing we can never earn back. If the gods envy anything, it is not our pleasures, but our pain. For pain is the proof that we feel, that we burn, that we exist. In suffering, we touch the truth most clearly that life itself is not a gift, but a demand. It does not ask whether you wish to live, it commands you to, and in that command lies both our curse and our strange, bitter freedom. We are not the masters of life, we are its instruments. The will uses us as its mouthpiece, its eyes, its trembling hands. It drives us toward creation, destruction, reproduction, despair, all to perpetuate itself. The will does not love us, it uses us. We are the sparks it throws into the void, each burning briefly before being replaced by another. You may believe that your struggles are unique, that your pain, your longing, your failures are somehow personal, but all of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again, for life repeats itself endlessly, not as progress, but as pattern. The same dramas, the same heartbreaks, the same illusions replay across centuries under new costumes and names. Only the scenery changes, the suffering remains. And yet, in this repetition, there is a kind of tragic beauty. To see the futility of it all and still create, still love, still weep, that is the only dignity left to us. The artist, the philosopher, the saint, they are not spared from pain, they are simply honest about it. They turn toward the wound instead of fleeing it. They understand that the task of life is not to escape suffering, but but to understand it, to look it in the face until the mask of terror turns into the calm of recognition. If life is a wound, then philosophy is the mirror held against it, not to heal it, for it cannot be healed, but to see it clearly, and in seeing, to become something more than the wound itself. Perhaps not happier, but wiser, not saved, but awake. To live with eyes open is to bleed consciously, and perhaps that strange, lucid bleeding is the closest thing to peace a thinking creature will ever know. Pause. The candle flickers, the voice softens. This is the first wound, the discovery that life was never meant to be good, it simply is. And in its cold, indifferent rhythm, it carries us all toward the same silence. But before we reach it, we will descend deeper into the anatomy of this suffering, into the will that binds us, into the hidden engine that turns the world and the heart alike. The wound has been opened. Now we must look inside. Beneath the skin of existence, beneath the pulse of daily hunger and fleeting joy, there lies a single force, relentless, blind, and ancient, the will to live. It is not a choice. It is not even yours. It is the original tyrant, the faceless God, that commands every motion, every breath, every trembling impulse of your flesh. It is what makes the worm crawl toward the light, what makes the lion hunt, what makes the human dream. It is the same force that builds cathedrals and commits murders, that loves passionately and dies miserably. In all beings, in every form, it seeks one thing, to continue. And yet, it does not know why. The will does not think, it only wants. It has no purpose beyond its own perpetuation. And that is the tragedy. The universe itself is driven by a mindless thirst, a cosmic appetite that feeds even on the pain of its creations. You call yourself a person, but that too is an illusion. You are a mask worn by the will, a passing expression in its endless play. Your desires, your ambitions, your heartbreaks, these are not yours. They are the dreams of the will, seen through the lens of consciousness. You believe you chase happiness, but in truth, you are being chased, dragged through life by forces that existed long before you were born. Every act of wanting is a confession of lack, and every lack is a small form of suffering. This is the first law of the human heart. To desire is to hurt. Désir promise fullness, but deliver hunger. The moment one longing is satisfied, another rises to take its place. The will never rests. It devours peace the way fire devours air. Look at the world. It is nothing but an infinite web of needs. The bird hungers for the worm for the leaf for the sundae. The sun burns itself to death to feed them all, and the cycle turns endlessly consumption as creation, death as life's price. To live is to feed upon something else, to consume, to destroy, to take. Every heartbeat is an act of quiet violence. And still, we dare to speak of innocence. But there is no innocence in survival. Even the saint who harms no one consumes the world simply by breathing. The purest existence is still built upon the suffering of others. Plants, animals, the land, the unseen. Every breath whispers, for me to be, something else must cease to be. This is the silent economy of existence, an endless chain of sacrifice, each link burning for the next. The will ensures that everything feeds on everything else, not out of malice, but out of necessity. It does not hate, it simply hungers. You may try to escape this law through wealth, through power, through pleasure, through prayer, but the hunger only changes its mask. The rich man craves more possessions, the poor man craves escape, the lover craves eternity, the ascetic craves release. The will adapts, transforms, hides, but it never dies. Even our greatest joys are merely the momentary silencing of pain. When we eat, we do not feel joy in fullness, we feel relief from hunger. When we fall in love, it is the will's cruelest trick to disguise dependency as meaning, to make us worship our own chains. And when the beloved is gone, we learn the true nature of that love. Not freedom, but captivity disguised as ecstasy. We are all prisoners of this machinery, our bodies, the engines, our minds, the fuel, our souls, the smoke. The intellect, that fragile light we call reason, exists not to liberate us, but to serve the will. It calculates, justifies, invents, a secretary arranging excuses for its master's desires. And when the will falters, reason kneels beside it, whispering lies of hope. This is why no amount of knowledge can make man happy. Wisdom does not kill the will, it only reveals its cruelty. The more clearly we see, the more clearly we suffer. The man who knows the truth cannot go back to sleep. He lives with the awareness that every joy he touches is written in the language of loss. Consider the artist, the thinker, the seeker. They suffer not because they are weak, but because they feel too deeply the absurdity of this endless hunger. They are the ones in whom the will turns against itself. The serpent biting its own tail. Their art, their philosophy, their compassion all arise from exhaustion, from the desperate wish to escape the compulsion to wish at all. And yet how beautiful that rebellion is. The moment the will becomes aware of itself, it begins to rot from within. The saint who renounces, the philosopher who withdraws, the poet who transforms suffering into song, all are expressions of the will's self-destruction, a divine suicide that gives birth to meaning in a meaningless world. Do not mistake this for despair. Despair belongs to those still enslaved by hope. The one who truly sees does not despair, he understands. He knows that suffering is not an accident, it is the structure of life itself. To be conscious is to suffer consciously. To be human is to carry awareness of the wound that never heals. And perhaps that is what makes humanity both cursed and sacred. For though the will enslaves us, we alone can look upon our chains and name them. We alone can stand in the storm of desire and whisper, I see you. The tiger does not question its hunger, the man does. The bird does not mourn the death of the worm, the man builds a theology to explain it. In our capacity to suffer with knowledge, we approach a strange kind of holiness, not the holiness of purity, but of comprehension. Pain is the first teacher and the last. All wisdom begins with the scream, the sound of the will realizing it cannot be satisfied. And yet, within that scream lies the seed of freedom. For when you see that no desire can deliver you, you begin, for the first time, to let go, pause. The voice lowers, not with resignation, but with intimacy. Understand this clearly. The goal of life is not pleasure, nor progress, nor even peace. It is awareness. To see the world as it is, to gaze upon its ceaseless suffering, and neither flee nor flinch. That is the beginning of liberation. When you stop fighting to make life good, life reveals itself in its raw, terrifying beauty. Every breath becomes sacred, not because it is pleasant, but because it is. The will may continue its blind dance, but you, the witness, may step aside, watching the world spin, not as a victim, but as one who has awoken. The wound remains, yes, but it no longer festers in ignorance. It shines like a scar illuminated by moonlight, painful but strangely pure. Long silence, a single drop of rain, then the final whisper. This is the anatomy of suffering, the engine beneath all joy, the pulse beneath all prayer. We have not escaped it, we have merely seen it, and in seeing we are changed. But the world has many disguises for its hunger. Now we turn our gaze to its grandest illusion, the world of culture, progress and civilization, the theater where the will dresses in costumes of meaning and performs its comedy of hope. When the wound becomes unbearable, humanity paints a mask over it. We call that mask civilization. We have built entire worlds upon this fragile disguise, temples of promise, towers of distraction, empires of self-deception. Each generation calls its illusion progress, and each dies before realizing it has only polished the same chain that has bound every creature since the dawn of time. The will is cunning. It knows that if man ever faced his suffering nakedly, he might cease to serve. So it weaves dream after dream to keep him moving, religion to comfort him, art to distract him, ambition to intoxicate him, pleasure to numb him. The modern world is not free from the ancient delusion. It has merely refined it into spectacle. Look around you. Society is a vast theater, each of us actors reading from invisible scripts. We chase symbols, status, wealth, love, reputation, as though they could save us from ourselves. We smile on cue, suffer in silence, and call it alive. And when the pain leaks through the paint, we rush to repair the mask. We buy, we pray, we post anything to fill the void that keeps whispering, none of this will last. There was a time when the gods consoled our despair. Now algorithms do. The priests promised heaven. The market promises happiness delivered to your door. The form changes, but the function remains. To lull the will, to soothe the restless slave inside. The tragedy is that modern man believes his distractions are freedom. He confuses abundance with meaning, novelty with depth, motion with direction. He fills his life with noise to avoid the sound of his own heart. He scrolls through the lives of others to forget his own futility. He thinks he is choosing, but he is being chosen by the will, by the machine, by the endless hunger for more. This is the new faith, the worship of possibility. The sacred word is next, al. Next product, next partner, next escape. We are always almost happy, always one acquisition away from peace. But peace never comes, because peace would mean the end of wanting, and the will not allow that. It would rather torment us with hope than release us into stillness. Even our morality is infected. We call cruelty, competition, vanity, self-expression, greed, ambition. Our language bends to protect the will's dominion. We no longer ask if something is good, only if it works. Efficiency has replaced virtue. Convenience has replaced wisdom. We worship the useful, forgetting that the useful serves nothing but desire itself. Art, once a mirror for truth, has become another marketplace. It flatters instead of wounds. It entertains instead of awakens. True art, that rare light born from suffering, has been exiled to the margins, where only the restless and the broken still seek it. For beauty now must justify itself in profit, and silence cannot be monetized. Religion, too, has adapted to the times. It no longer speaks of renunciation or transcendence. It preaches self-fulfillment, success, and self-esteem. The new heaven is the life you can manifest, the paradise you can purchase. The cross has been replaced by a mirror. We no longer kneel before God. We pose before ourselves. And yet, despite all these distractions, the wound still whispers beneath the glitter. You can feel it in the late-night scroll, through meaningless images, in the sudden exhaustion after pleasure, in the anxiety that returns the moment silence falls. You can sense it when the applause fades, when the lover turns away, when the new thing becomes the old one. That whisper is truth trying to be heard through the static of the world. The culture calls such awareness depression. It medicates those who see too clearly. It tells them something is wrong with their chemistry, not with their civilization. But perhaps their sorrow is sanity, the soul's refusal to keep pretending that constant distraction is life. When the mind can no longer bear its illusions, it collapses inward, and from that collapse, philosophy begins. Not the academic kind, written for applause, but the kind whispered in the dark, a man alone, staring into the mirror of existence, asking, what is this all for? The answer, of course, is nothing. And yet, once that nothing is accepted, a strange light dawns. For to see through illusion is not to die, but to wake. You discover that the world does not need to mean anything for it to be beautiful. Its futility is its purity, its pointlessness, its peace. Think of the stars. They burn themselves to death, indifferent to whether anyone watches. Their light travels millions of years only to fall upon empty ground. Yet in that senseless radiance lies a majesty beyond purpose. So too with life it shines, suffers, and vanishes. Its tragedy is its grace. To live without illusion is not to live without art, but to make art from the ruins of illusion. To build meaning not as belief, but as gesture, a defiance that says, I know this will pass, and yet I create. Such creation is no longer a service to the will, it is a rebellion against it. It is the mind's declaration that even in futility there can be form. This is the secret the modern world forgets. Disillusionment is not despair, it is clarity. The man who has seen through everything is not empty, he is clean. His laughter is quiet, his steps deliberate. He no longer needs the approval of the crowd, for he knows the crowd dances to the same invisible strings. And perhaps if enough of us cease to dance, the music of the will might falter, if only for a breath, a heartbeat, a flicker of stillness. The voice softens, almost tender now. The world will always build new illusions. That is its nature, the will must dream to endure. But the one who wakes can walk among the dreamers without envy. He sees their games, their noise, their desperate joy, and he no longer condemns them. He understands. For they too are suffering. Each illusion is a bandage over the same wound. And to pity them is kinder than to judge them. Pause the faint sound of wind through empty streets. We have now seen the mask, the bright surface that hides the universal hunger. But what happens when the mask falls completely? When illusion collapses and the self stands naked before the void? That is where we must go next. Into the moment of lucid despair, where seeing becomes salvation and suffering at last begins to purify itself. There comes a point when the world's noise fades not because it has stopped, but because you have finally ceased to listen. At first, this silence feels like death. All the voices that once promised, meaning love, success, belonging, dissolve into the cold hum of nothingness. But stay there long enough and you will find that beneath the despair lies something ancient and unmovable, the stillness of truth. When illusion ceases, suffering remains, but it changes its nature. No longer the frantic pain of the will unfulfilled. It becomes a quiet awareness, the realization that suffering was never the enemy, but the teacher. The will, that ancient tyrant, begins to lose its grip not through resistance, but through understanding. The more you see it, the less power it has. It cannot enslave the one who observes it calmly. Lucid despair is not the darkness of those who have lost hope. It is the calm of those who no longer need it. It is the moment the heart stops demanding that life be different and begins, instead, to see what life truly is. A ceaseless unfolding of hunger and fading, a pattern too vast to judge. In this state, one discovers that peace is not something to be achieved. It is what remains when the striving ends. It does not arrive as triumph, but as the quiet collapse of will. The flame no longer fights the wind, it simply burns, knowing it will go out. You have felt this before in small, fleeting moments. Perhaps after exhaustion, when the struggle loses meaning and only stillness remains. Perhaps in grief, when tears dry and silence returns. Or in the late hours of the night, when all distractions have fallen away and you are left alone with the unadorned weight of being. That silence, painful, infinite, is not emptiness, it is clarity. The will never stops hungering, but in the lucid mind, its voice grows thin. You still feel its pull, the ache to become, to gain, to change, but you no longer mistake it for yourself. You become the witness of the will, not its instrument. And in that separation, the self begins to dissolve. This is the great paradox. The moment you see there is no you controlling life, you begin to feel more alive than ever. Because the suffering that once felt personal reveals itself to be universal, not your tragedy, but the rhythm of existence itself. You suffer as the wind suffers when it collides with the mountain, as the ocean suffers when it crashes against the shore. You are not apart from the world's pain, you are its awareness. You are the will seeing itself. And in that recognition, the fever of striving begins to cool. Compassion is born from this clarity, not pity, which looks downward, but the deep recognition that every being is caught in the same snare. Every creature fights the same invisible battle, the bird, the beggar, the king, the child, all driven by the same blind longing to persist. To see this is to forgive the world its cruelty, for cruelty is not its choice, but its nature. Even evil, that which we most despise, is only the will turned inward, a being clawing at itself for release. Understanding this does not excuse it, but it strips it of mystery. We stop hating the wicked because we see they are sick with the same disease, existence itself. And so, compassion grows not from love, but from insight. It is the quiet empathy of one prisoner to another. It says, I too am bound, I too ache, and I understand. It does not seek to fix the world, for it knows the wound cannot be healed. Only seen, only shared. When this compassion matures, even the boundaries of self begin to blur. You look upon others and feel not sympathy, but sameness. The illusion of separateness, that great lie of the intellect fades. You realize that all pain is one pain, all striving, one motion, and what you called I was merely a ripple on the surface of a single ocean. This awareness brings not joy, but serenity, a stillness that needs no consolation. For what can frighten the one who no longer clings to survival? Death, that old phantom, loses its teeth. It becomes not an enemy, but the closing of a book that was never truly yours to write. Even beauty changes meaning in this light. It no longer seduces, it reveals. The sunset is no longer a symbol of romance or loss. It is simply what it is, the world vanishing into itself. Music no longer excites the heart, it dissolves it, leaving only the vibration, the pure sensation of being without thought. Art, contemplation, even silence, these are no longer escapes. They are glimpses into what life would be if the will were still. The aesthetic moment, Schopenhauer once said, is the suspension of the will. It is that rare instant when we cease to want and simply perceive. In beauty, we momentarily forget ourselves. We become pure eye, pure ear, pure awareness. No past, no future, no I. Just the raw presence of existence, a breath between pain and pain. Those who learn to dwell in this space are the true sages. They do not conquer the world, they outsee it. They walk among chaos with unshaken calm, for they have already accepted what others spend lifetimes resisting, that there is no final victory, no lasting peace, only the grace of seeing clearly before the night comes. The will continues its blind turning. The seers still arise, pain still returns. But the awakened one moves through them as through weather, without attachment, without protest. He feels deeply, but no longer clings. He loves, knowing love will end. He creates, knowing all things will fade. And in that acceptance, his heart grows vast, not happy, but free. There is a dignity in this clarity, a quiet nobility that comes from bowing before the structure of existence. Without resentment, without plea, he no longer asks life for mercy. He offers life understanding instead. Such is the purification through despair, not the annihilation of the spirit, but its refinement. Despair burns away illusion, leaving only the naked essence of being, awareness without demand. The voice softens to a near whisper. We were never meant to win against suffering. We were meant to witness it, to bear it with eyes open, to let it carve wisdom into the soul. And when all illusions are stripped away, what remains is not emptiness, but a strange tenderness, the tenderness of one who has seen the world's cruelty and still chooses to stay. This is the moment of lucid despair, when the soul stops fighting and begins to see. From here, there is nowhere left to fall, only the long descent into stillness, the peace of surrender, the beauty of the wound, finally accepted. When the fire of striving burns itself out, when the will grows tired of its own demands, what remains is not defeat, it is peace. A strange, sober peace that asks for nothing, promises nothing, and yet feels like the first honest breath you've taken in a lifetime. This is not the peace of the successful, nor the bliss of the ignorant. It is the peace of one who has looked life directly in the face, seen its machinery of suffering, and no longer turns away. It arrives quietly, not as revelation, but as a soft dissolving, the I loosening its grip on the world, the self realizing it was never more than a wave in a boundless sea. To awaken is to vanish. For so long, you believed the world revolved around your becoming, that happiness, achievement, love, or enlightenment waited somewhere ahead, just beyond the next victory. Now you see the futility of that pursuit. There is no summit. The mountain of desire has no peak. You climb, and at last you discover that the mountain was you, the endless, restless, wanting that mistook motion for meaning. When this truth settles into the heart, something miraculous happens. The burden of existing lightens. You stop trying to make the world fit your expectations. You let it be what it is, terrible, beautiful, indifferent, complete. And in that surrender, you begin to love it, not with the feverish love of possession, but with the calm affection of recognition. You love the world as you would a dying friend, not because it will stay, but because it is here now, flickering, fragile, finite. You love not its promise, but its presence. To live this way is to live without illusion, and yet without despair. It is to walk through the ruins of meaning and find, among the rubble, the quiet splendor of being itself. You begin to notice the small things, the sound of rain against glass, the slow drift of smoke from a candle, the way light touches dust and turns it into gold. Nothing has changed in the world. Only the fever of your perception has cooled. You no longer seek eternity. You begin to see that eternity was never a place beyond time, but the silence within every moment, the gap between one thought and the next, the stillness behind every motion, the peace that was always here, waiting for you to stop running. The saints and the sages call this enlightenment, but perhaps it is simpler than that. Perhaps it is just the exhaustion of pretending, the acceptance that life will never explain itself and that it doesn't need to. When the will grows quiet, you cease to fight with reality. You no longer demand that things should be otherwise. The mind softens, the heart opens. Even pain loses its edge. You feel it, but it does not define you. It moves through you like wind through an empty house, leaving only the echo of its passing. This is the wisdom of surrender, not the weakness of giving up, but the strength of ceasing to struggle against what is. To say yes to the inevitable is to find freedom where resistance only found despair. The ego fears this surrender, for it is the end of its reign, but the soul, the deeper awareness that has always been watching, knows it as homecoming. To surrender is not to die. It is to stop pretending to be separate from life. You are no longer the actor. You are the stage, the script, the silence between the lines. You see the endless play of existence, its beauty and its brutality intertwined, and you no longer ask the script to change. You bow to it instead, not out of submission, but out of reverence. For only now do you see that the wound and the wonder were never apart. Every tragedy, every longing, every loss was a thread in the same tapestry, woven by the will, illuminated by awareness, and finally dissolved into stillness. The universe has always been whole. It was your perception that was divided. To awaken is not to escape the world, but to dissolve the boundary between you and it, to realize that the same force that bursts the stars beats within your chest, that the pain you feel is the world's way of knowing itself, that your tears are not personal, but cosmic, the rain of consciousness falling back into the ocean of being. And so, the philosopher of shadow stands at the end of the path, not triumphant, but tranquil. He no longer seeks meaning in the world. He becomes the stillness through which the world is seen. He knows that even if life remains cruel, its cruelty is part of its beauty. For the rose could not bloom without the thorn, and light could not be seen without darkness. He has stopped asking, "Why must we suffer?" and now whispers, "How beautiful that we can." For to suffer is to feel, and to feel is to live, and to live even briefly is to touch the mystery that no concept can contain. In this final acceptance, there is tenderness, the kind that no belief or philosophy can manufacture, a tenderness that comes from having seen everything die and loving it still. It is not optimism, but grace. Grace not because the world has changed, but because the self that demanded it to change has disappeared. All that remains is awareness, unburdened, unafraid, awake. And from this awareness, a quiet love radiates, not for something, but for everything, the cruel and the kind, the tragic and the divine, the wound and the healing. All are facets of the same light. You understand now. To be human is to suffer, but to awaken is to suffer consciously. To look at the wound and in its reflection see eternity staring back. So let the world be what it is. Let it dance, break, and burn. Let the will continue its blind procession through time. You are no longer its captive. You are the mirror in which it is seen. And in that mirror, even the storm becomes beautiful. The wound remains, but it glows now, like a scar in moonlight. It no longer asks to be healed. It only asks to be understood. That understanding, that lucid acceptance of all that is what we once called peace.